Welcome back to the Mad Genius Thesis.
Yes.
Where we untangle that web between creativity and mental illness.
Right.
Today we are diving deep into Stephen Diamond's Anger, Madness, and the Daimonic.
Yeah.
And this book really tackles some heavy emotional territory.
It does.
You might be thinking, Daimonic.
Right.
Sounds a bit like a horror movie, but trust me.
Yeah.
It's way more interesting than that.
It is. It really is. And, the book opens with this gripping account of Colin Ferguson's 1993 shooting rampage on the Long Island Railroad.
Wow.
And this horrifying act, which seemed utterly senseless at the time, becomes a jumping-off point for Diamond to explore how even extreme violence can stem from, deep-seated rage and frustration with life.
Yeah, it definitely grabbed my attention. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of Ferguson's case, let's break down this daimonic concept. It's not about demonic possession or anything.
Not at all. No, Diamond distinguishes daimonic from demonic, which is purely evil.
Right.
Instead, he describes the daimonic as this kind of primal force within us. A raw energy with the potential for both creation and destruction. You can think of it like a powerful wild horse. Ride it skillfully, and it can take you to incredible heights, but lose control, and you risk getting trampled.
I'm starting to see the picture.
Yeah.
So how does anger fit into this whole daimonic equation?
Well, Diamond argues that anger is a fundamental component of this daimonic force. He suggests that a certain degree of anger is inherent to the human condition. It's kind of a remnant of our evolutionary fight-or-flight response. So when we perceive a threat, anger kicks in, preparing us to, fight or flee.
That makes sense, but we're not living in the savannah anymore. Constantly dodging predators, so why are we still so angry?
Well, that's where things get interesting in modern society.
The threats we face are often more abstract. Frustrations with work. Lack of meaning in life. Societal injustices. But our primal wiring hasn't caught up. So these modern frustrations can trigger that same fight or flight response.
I see.
Leading to, a buildup of anger.
And in extreme cases like Colin Ferguson, that anger can spill over into violence.
Exactly. Diamond analyzes Ferguson's life. Highlighting a series of losses and struggles. The death of his parents. The challenges of being an immigrant in America. And then this pervasive sense of being wronged by society.
Wow.
So this simmering resentment left unchecked ultimately fueled his horrific act.
Okay, so we've got this potent force within us. This daimonic energy that can be both creative and destructive. And anger is a major player in all of this. But how does this play out differently for men and women?
Well, that's one of the more thought-provoking aspects of Diamond's work.
He delves into how the daimonic manifests in men through the lens of what he calls castration anxiety.
Now, before you get the wrong idea, he's not talking about literal castration.
No. It's symbolic, of course. Diamond is referring to a deep-seated fear some men harbor of losing their power, their masculinity. And this fear can manifest in various ways, sometimes as hostility or aggression towards women.
So it's not just about anger,
right,
but about this underlying insecurity that fuels it.
Precisely. And Diamond connects this to ancient myths like Pandora's box, where a woman is blamed for unleashing evil into the world.
Right.
He argues that these stories reflect, age-old anxieties about female power.
Wow. It's fascinating how these ancient narratives still resonate with us on a psychological level.
Yeah.
But it's not just men grappling with the daimonic right.
Right.
Diamond talks about women and fear of the masculine as well.
Absolutely. He explores how women can experience the daimonic through a sense of being overwhelmed or controlled by male power.
Right.
This can manifest as, a fear of assertiveness, a struggle to claim one's voice, or a tendency to shrink in the face of male dominance.
And sadly, this fear can sometimes be rooted in real-world experiences of violence or oppression.
Yes. It's a complex issue with deep societal and psychological roots.
Yeah, so we've got this powerful force, the daimonic, playing out in different ways for men and women. Fueled by deep-seated fears and anxieties.
Exactly.
It begs the question,
Yeah.
how do we navigate this?
Right.
How do we harness this raw energy without succumbing to its destructive potential?
Right.
That's where things get really interesting.
It is.
All ears, give us some hope here.
Well, thankfully, Diamond doesn't just leave us with this bleak picture of humanity wrestling with its demons.
Okay.
He offers a way forward through a therapeutic approach he calls existential depth psychology. And it's about understanding, accepting, and working with these powerful emotions.
Okay.
Rather than just trying to suppress them.
Okay. I like where this is going.
Yeah.
So instead of running from our anger,
right,
we learn to face it head on.
Exactly. Instead of viewing these emotions as enemies, we start to see them as messengers, trying to tell us something important about ourselves.
Right.
Diamond believes that by delving into the root of our anger, we can not only heal, but also unlock creative potential that might have been blocked by those very emotions.
Hold on. Are you saying that our anger can actually fuel creativity?
In a way, yes. Diamond offers some compelling case studies to illustrate this. One that really stuck with me involved a patient who had recurring dreams about shooting children.
Whoa, that's pretty disturbing.
It was, but through therapy, this man was able to connect those terrifying dreams back to his own repressed rage towards his abusive father.
Oh.
So he had bottled up all of this anger, and it was manifesting in these nightmarish ways.
So by uncovering the source of his anger, he could start to heal.
Exactly. But here's the fascinating part.
Okay.
As he began to process his anger, he also discovered a newfound creative energy.
Okay.
He'd always wanted to be a writer.
Right.
But his fear and anger had held him back.
Yeah.
Once he started to confront those emotions, his creativity began to flow.
That's incredible. It's like our emotions, even the negative ones, hold a hidden power that can be harnessed for good.
It's a fascinating idea, and it leads us to another key concept Diamond explores. Dystomonia.
Okay, I'm sensing a vocabulary quiz coming up. What is dystomonia?
Think of it as an imbalance in the daimonic forces.
Okay.
Remember our wild horse analogy?
Yeah.
Dystomonia is like letting that horse just take the reins, leading to a wild, unpredictable ride.
Okay.
It's when the destructive side of the daimonic takes over.
So it's not just about experiencing anger, but about letting it control you.
Exactly. Diamond uses some vivid examples from literature and film to illustrate dystomonia in action.
Okay, like what?
Well, he talks about Captain Ahab in Melville's Moby Dick, who's consumed by this obsessive rage against the white whale.
So Ahab's quest for revenge is actually a manifestation of his own internal struggle with the daimonic.
That's one way to look at it, and it ultimately leads to his destruction, as well as the destruction of everyone around him.
Kind of a cautionary tale about what happens when we let our anger consume us.
Precisely. Diamond also delves into Vincent van Gogh, whose passionate art was deeply intertwined with intense emotional turmoil and ultimately his suicide. So his brilliance and his self-destruction seem to be two sides of the same coin.
Another example of the daimonic's dual nature.
And then there's the filmmaker Ingmar Bergman, who famously battled with insomnia and inner demons, channeling those experiences into his often dark and psychologically complex films.
It makes you wonder, is there a connection between these artists' struggles and their creative genius?
That's the question Diamond leaves us with.
Okay.
He doesn't offer any easy answers. But he makes a compelling case for the idea that there's a deep connection between our shadow selves, our capacity for both good and evil, and that spark of creativity that makes us human.
Wow. So much to think about already.
I know.
It sounds like this daimonic force. It's more than just a psychological concept.
It is.
It's woven into the fabric of our lives, influencing our relationships, our creativity, even our darkest impulses. It's making me wonder, how do we recognize this force in our own lives? And more importantly, how do we channel it in a healthy way? I guess that's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive.
We will.
Into anger, madness, and the daimonic.
Yes.
All right. So we've established that this daimonic force, with all its creative and destructive potential, is a pretty big deal. But for those of us who aren't battling white whales or painting starry nights, how does this all apply to everyday life?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I mean, I get angry sometimes, sure. But I'm not exactly Vincent van Gogh.
Well, and that's where Diamond's concept of existential depth psychology really comes into play. Right. It's not just about analyzing tortured artists or anything. Right. It's a framework for understanding and working with the daimonic forces within all of us.
Okay, but how does that actually work in practice?
Right.
Is this something I could try on my own?
Yeah.
Or do I need to find a therapist who specializes in existential depth psychology?
Well, therapy can certainly be beneficial.
Right.
Especially if you're, struggling with intense anger or other challenging emotions.
Okay.
But even without formal therapy, there are things you can do to start exploring the daimonic in your own life. Okay. And it starts with paying attention to your anger.
You mean not just ignoring it or trying to shove it down?
Exactly. Instead of seeing anger as, a bad emotion, try to view it as a signal, a message from your deeper self. Yeah. Like, what is it trying to tell you?
Okay.
What need or desire is not being met?
So it's like treating anger as a clue.
Yeah.
A puzzle to be solved.
Right.
Rather than a problem to be eradicated.
Precisely. And this is where journaling can be incredibly helpful.
Okay.
Write down your angry thoughts and feelings.
Uh-huh.
Don't censor yourself.
Right.
Just let it all out.
Yeah.
Then once you've, vented on paper, go back and look for patterns.
What kind of patterns?
Well, maybe you notice that you always get angry in traffic.
Right.
Or maybe it's certain people or situations that just trigger your rage.
Yeah.
By identifying these triggers,
okay,
you can start to understand the underlying causes of your anger.
That makes sense. But how do we actually deal with those underlying causes?
Right.
Is it just about figuring out what makes us tick?
Well, there's definitely more to it.
Okay.
Diamond emphasizes the importance of taking responsibility for our anger.
Okay.
It's easy to blame external factors.
Right.
But ultimately, it's our choice how we respond to those triggers.
I guess that's where the existential part of existential depth psychology comes in.
Exactly.
We have to make choices about how we want to live our lives.
Right.
Even when those choices are difficult.
Exactly. And this involves confronting some uncomfortable truths about ourselves, our fears, our insecurities, even the shadow sides of our personalities.
Right.
But it's through this process of self-exploration that we can start to heal old wounds and create a more fulfilling life.
It sounds like hard work.
Yeah.
But also incredibly rewarding.
It can be.
But what about the creative potential you mentioned earlier? How does tapping into the daimonic actually help us become more creative?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Diamond believes that by confronting our anger and other, negative emotions, we can actually access a wellspring of creative energy.
Okay.
He argues that, many artists, writers, and musicians intuitively tap into this energy, often unconsciously.
So their art becomes a way of processing their inner turmoil.
Exactly.
Of transforming their pain into something beautiful or meaningful.
Exactly. And even if you don't consider yourself an artist in the traditional sense, you can still harness this creative potential.
Okay.
It might manifest in your work, your relationships, or even just the way you approach everyday challenges.
Okay. I'm starting to see the bigger picture here.
Yeah.
It's not about denying our anger or trying to become some kind of emotionless robot.
Right.
It's about acknowledging the full spectrum of human emotions. The good, the bad, and the messy. Yeah. And finding ways to integrate them into our lives in a healthy and creative way.
So that's a great way to put it. Diamond is essentially encouraging us to embrace the totality of our being, even the parts that make us uncomfortable.
Yeah.
He suggests that by doing so, we can tap into a deeper well of wisdom and creativity.
It's a powerful message.
It is.
And it challenges a lot of the conventional wisdom about mental illness and creativity.
Yeah.
Instead of seeing them as separate, even opposing forces.
Right.
Diamond is suggesting they might be interconnected.
Right.
In ways we're only beginning to understand.
It's definitely a shift in perspective.
Yeah.
But if we're willing to challenge those old assumptions, it opens up some exciting possibilities.
Speaking of challenging assumptions,
let's
go back to Diamond's examples of artists like Abbott, Van Gogh, and Bergman.
Yeah.
It's tempting to romanticize their struggles.
Yeah.
And say, Well, they were tortured geniuses, and that's what made their art so powerful.
Right.
But isn't that kind of a dangerous oversimplification?
That's a really important point, and it's something Diamond himself acknowledges.
Okay.
It's crucial to avoid romanticizing mental illness.
Right.
Or suggesting that it's somehow necessary for artistic greatness.
Right.
Many artists create incredible work despite their struggles, not because of them.
Right.
And for some, those struggles ultimately lead to self-destruction.
Yeah.
Which is never something to celebrate.
So it's not about glorifying the darkness.
Right.
But about finding a way to navigate it.
Right.
To find the light within it.
Exactly. Diamond isn't suggesting that we should all strive to be tortured artists.
Right.
He's simply pointing out that there's a deep connection between our inner lives, our shadow sides, and our creative potential.
And by understanding that connection, we can learn to channel our emotions in more constructive ways, whether it's through art writing, music, or simply finding more fulfilling ways to live our lives.
Right.
I don't know about you, but I'm starting to feel a little more optimistic
Yeah.
about the potential of the human spirit.
Yeah.
Even with all its flaws and complexities.
I think that's a great takeaway from this part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
Diamond's book offers a lot to chew on.
It does.
And it certainly prompted some profound reflections for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm already thinking about my own anger in a different light.
Uh-huh.
And I'm definitely feeling inspired to do some journaling and self-exploration.
Yeah.
But before I disappear into my own emotional labyrinth, let's move on to the final part of our deep dive.
Okay.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on Diamond's ultimate conclusions about the daimonic and its implications for our understanding of creativity and the human condition.
Okay.
Ready to wrap things up?
Let's do it.
All right. So we've explored this daimonic force within us and, how it can manifest in both creative and destructive ways. Yeah. We've talked about anger castration, anxiety, fear of the masculine, even disturbing dreams about shooting children.
It's been a lot. Yeah.
It's been a wild ride. But before we wrap up our deep dive into anger madness and the daimonic, I'm curious to hear your take on Diamond's overall message. Like, what's the big takeaway here for you?
Well, I think what's so fascinating is that Diamond doesn't really offer easy answers.
Okay.
Or a neat little prescription for taming the daimonic.
Right.
Instead, he kind of leaves us with this really profound question.
Okay.
Is it possible to have true creative genius without some degree of dysdaimonia, without venturing into, those dark, messy spaces of the psyche?
That's a big one.
It is.
It's like he's suggesting that maybe those shadow sides, the anger, the fear, the pain, are actually essential ingredients in the creative process.
Exactly. He doesn't explicitly say that, mental illness is a prerequisite for creativity.
Right.
But he definitely challenges the notion that they're entirely separate entities.
Right.
He points out that many artists, writers, and musicians have grappled with mental health challenges and suggest that there might be a connection between their inner turmoil and their artistic output.
Okay, but isn't that a bit romanticized?
Well,
are we saying that suffering is like a necessary path to brilliance?
And that's where, Diamond is very careful to avoid romanticizing mental illness.
Right.
And he emphasizes that there's a big difference between, experiencing emotional depth and actually being clinically diagnosed with a mental health disorder.
Right.
He's not advocating for suffering, but rather suggesting that those who are willing to confront their inner demons, to explore the full spectrum of human emotions, might have access to a deeper well of creative energy.
So it's not about glorifying the darkness, but about recognizing its potential.
Yes.
Its power to fuel creativity and insight.
Precisely. Diamond uses this really interesting analogy of a diamond, which is, formed under intense heat and pressure.
Right.
And he suggests that our creative potential might be forged in a similar way through facing and transforming our challenges.
That's a powerful image.
It is.
So what does this all mean for the average person who isn't necessarily trying to become the next Van Gogh or Bergman?
Right.
How do we apply these ideas to our own lives?
Well, I think it starts with becoming more aware of our inner landscape.
Okay.
our emotions, our fears, our shadow sides.
Yeah.
Diamond encourages us to practice self-reflection.
Okay.
To engage in practices like journaling meditation or therapy to help us, understand and integrate those shadowy parts of ourselves.
It sounds like it's about finding a balance.
Yeah.
Not suppressing those difficult emotions.
Right.
But not letting them control us either.
Exactly. It's about finding ways to channel those intense emotions in a constructive way.
Yeah.
Whether it's through creative expression or problem solving, or simply, becoming more self-aware and compassionate human beings.
It's a lot to take in, but I'm definitely feeling inspired.
Yeah.
This deep dive has really made me think about anger and creativity in a whole new light.
Me too.
I'm even considering taking up painting. Who knows? Maybe there's a hidden masterpiece lurking within my own daimonic depths.
I wouldn't be surprised.
For our listeners, if you're intrigued by these ideas and want to explore them further, I highly recommend checking out Anger, Madness, and the Daimonic.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It's a challenging read, but definitely worth the effort.
It is.
And even if you don't agree with everything Diamond says,
right,
it's sure to spark some fascinating conversations and self-reflection.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been another deep dive here at the Mad Genius Thesis.
It has.
I'm your host.
And I'm your expert.
We'll see all of you next time.